husband. He's having a mental breakdown after he found out about me and his boss. I really don't know what came over me when I committed adultery and destroyed my wonderful matrimony. If I knew that the consequences would be this greater, I wouldn't even have started it. I have broken the only person that mattered in my life. The person who made me who I am today, made me believe in myself again. Sometimes I don't know how our minds work. We as humans, we tend to asterisk it on the very same tree that provides us with shadow when the sun is too hot. I don't know what happened to me when I decided to get into an intimate relationship with my husband's boss. I love my husband so much, and I regret ever breaking his heart like that. I guess I couldn't ignore temptations and desires to explore. You know, when it comes to being intimate, my husband was not explosive like I had wanted him to be. I was no longer feeling the heat that I had felt before. I guess as we grow older, a lot changes. The thing got worse when the tables had turned. You fall in love with someone and end up marrying them, not knowing that the person you had thought you knew, you actually knew nothing about them. You just knew the basic information. And if my husband was to find out things about his wife that you didn't know about. Not small things, but things that would ruin your relationship and ruin her life if they were to come out. Well, my name is Kim, female, 25, and my husband, Kenneth, male, 31. We have been married for 2 years. Kenny, that's how I call my husband, and I met at some business event that had taken place in the restaurant that I was working at. I don't really remember much about our first encounter, but all I know is that I saw a polite, handsome guy. He came to me and asked for my service at their table, of which I gladly did. Not because I wanted to, but because he had approached me in a very calm, respectful, and polite manner. You know, some afforded people don't respect people like us, who are waitresses. They tend to treat us like garbage. They want us to bow down to them just because they have money and we are hustling for a better life and survival. When I got to Kenny's table, I assisted them with what they needed. So when the event finished, Kenneth came to me at the counter and gave the biggest tip. I was so happy because I was going to be able to provide for my grandmother and my 6-year-old little sister. A few weeks later, Kenny came back again to the restaurant and gave me his business card. He told me to call him because he had an offer for me. I didn't understand what he was trying to say because I didn't know him and he didn't know me, so why would he come to my workplace and tell me that he has something to offer me? I felt offended, like he looked at me and felt pity and decided to make me a charity case. I didn't know what he wanted to offer me. My mind was running. I had thought maybe he wanted to kidnap me and sell me to the highest bidder. We no longer trust anyone nowadays. People just get missing every single day of our lives. So it wasn't easy to just trust him more, especially since he was a man of standards like him. He looked like those types of men who didn't settle for less, who loved those Barbie dolls who want to be ladies while I was just a simple and natural girl. Anyways, days later, I called the number that Kenny had given me the last day we saw each other. To my surprise, it was answered by him. At first, I got tongue-tied. I regretted even calling because I didn't know what to say. I was really lost for words. Is this even normal and possible to just get lost for words when you have to speak? So as he was about to hang up, I decided to speak. I don't really remember what I had said, but I remember him asking to meet up with me. I hesitated at first, but I eventually gave in. 2 days later, we met and somehow we clicked. I had thought he was a man who was always serious and always talking about work, but with him that wasn't the case. He was a very free-spirited person and I enjoyed his company. We got a chance to get to know each other better on that day. He was actually not that type of arrogant guy, because they have money. Kenny was just a sweetheart, and his personality and the real Kenny in general made me fall in love. Well, not really in love, but I developed a crush on him. A few months later, we started dating. Kenny was a peaceful guy, but I had once noticed something when someone bumped into his car. He got furious. He even changed color. He became red in an instant. He had once told me that the car he was driving was his favorite because it was a gift from his late father. So the guy who bumped into his car was arrogant, and he wasn't sorry for what he had done. Instead, he told him that the next time he should focus on where he was going and not stop the car everywhere. I saw that the other guy was kind of intoxicated, but Kenny didn't care about all that. And another thing, the robot was red, meaning the wrong person was the other guy. Kenny attacked the guy and started calling him names. I understood his anger and frustrations, but he was doing it too much. To say I got scared would be an understatement. I was terrified. I asked myself who was the person that I had fallen in love with. What he did was somehow, I don't know how I can explain this, but it made me have some sort of second thoughts about our relationship. Several months in a relationship with Kenny. He decided to pop the biggest question ever. Mind you had fallen so hard for Kenny. That time we were on a journey of healing for him so he would be able to control his anger issues and mental breakdown. I was glad that he had opened up with me with his biggest secret behind the mental breakdown that usually did. I promised to be there for him through every struggle and health. We both loved each other deeply, and our future looked bright. But what did I do? One fateful day, I had noticed that Kenny was acting differently. He seemed distant, and his usual cheerful demeanor was nowhere to be found. I tried to talk to him about it, but he brushed her concerns aside, claiming it was just a bad day at work. At first, I didn't want to bother him or become a nuisance to him for always asking what was wrong with him, until I saw that he was getting more and more distant, and his behavior was not changing even one bit. So one day, he had invited me to be his +1 at his work's function. For some reasons, I agreed to be his +1. I mean, he was my man after all, and I didn't want to stay at home and be bored. So I said, why not? Such opportunities come once in a blue moon. My husband was not the kind of a guy that would randomly ask you to be his +1 in a formal function at his work. I would sometimes wonder who he was taking because he was not asking me. And the day he asked me to be his +1 was the first one. The weekend of the function came and I was super excited. Not because I was going to a function, but because my husband had thought of me for once and made me his +1. Kenny was a financial manager at his workplace, which was why I had thought that maybe he was the boss when I first saw him hosting an event like this kind of thing at the restaurant that I had been working at. Only to find out later that it was just a small and intimate event that his boss had asked him to host just to honor and appreciate his employees, especially those in the financial department. So the people that were there were his team. Anyway, when we got to the function, I was mesmerized by the decor, the settings, and everything. It was just so amazing. I noticed that other staff members were welcoming and loving. Mind you, it was my first time going to my husband's workplace. I had never been there before, and I felt really important when Kenny invited me to go with him at his work's function. He introduced me to his team members and other employees. Then at the end, he introduced me to his boss. His boss looked very young and charming. The gentleness in his was one of the things that made him look incredible. I couldn't take my eyes off the boss. I was amazed by the fact that he was running a huge company while he looked so young. After I was introduced to the boss, the function went on and on. To tell the truth, the function was boring because they were speaking mostly about their work and their annual improvements and performances at the teams. I just enjoyed the free food and drinks. So I decided to just get drunk, or at least tipsy. I mean, Kenny had changed in me, and when he asked me to be his +1, he was actually asking me to be his +1 so he could ditch me in front of the strangers that he was working with and went to socialize with them. I was not even asked or checked if I was okay or not, and if I was enjoying the function. So Kenny had left me alone and went to engage with some group of ladies that he works with. I won't lie and say I wasn't jealous, because I was. I felt somehow insecure about what he was doing. I felt disrespected and disregarded. As I was still sitting alone, enjoying my drinks, Kenny's boss approached me and asked if I was okay, and I was sitting alone. He was a real gentleman. He then joined me in the table that I was sitting on. I had started being tipsy. The boss introduced himself as Chris, male, 33. He was actually what I can call a handsomeness with brains. Just like they say in the girls who are smart and beautiful, they would say, beauty with brains. Chris was a good company. The conversations were flowing. It didn't feel like we had just known each other. It was actually a house on fire when we were together. We ended up exchanging numbers, and since then we got pretty close. I had never been that close with a male person except for Kenny. I didn't even bother telling Kenny about my newfound friendship with his boss. Kenny was not the guy that would accept that his partner was friends with his boss. I also wouldn't accept that. Kenny was not the type of a guy that you would vent on. It was always like he didn't have any feelings, so he didn't know how to console a woman and give her advice. But with Chris, it was different. It was like he knew my true feelings whenever I was not feeling okay. He would either sense or whatever, but I would hear him ask what was wrong. I loved that attention, being cared for. Chris was a very good friend, a good listener, and a great advisor. I was enjoying every time I was spending with Chris. It was always full of fun, encouragement, support, and care. Kenny only cared about himself and would always get ignorant on other important things. His mental breakdown conditions somehow took his feelings away. I loved Kenny so much, and I was seeing myself spending the rest of my life with him. My husband was amazing in his own way, but he never considered other people's behavior. Kenny had started therapy, and I prayed that the counselor would be able to help my husband, and also hoped that my husband's mental health would improve. Their session went well, and the counselor made some recommendations for both of us. Kenny left the session feeling a bit better, and he decided to take the counselor's advice on board, which came as a good thing to start healing from any traumatic experience that he had once faced. They used to say, ignorance is the lack of knowledge or unawareness of the events happening around you. The deeper and true meaning of ignorance is the ability to act unaware or unconscious about certain events happening around you with the hope for change, while trying to do something else to bury the consciousness about the environment. An ignorant person is the person who is foolish and not able to think of a solution. Instead, they try to run away from a problem by creating a scenario in their head. That will give them false hope. That was the major problem with Kenny. He was too ignorant, and I didn't want him to be like that. Anyway, my friendship relationship with Chris became more and more blooming and booming. Funny thing was that I thought Kenny was not seeing any changes in me, the happiness, the always going out. He was just ignorant, and I knew that he had been pretending the whole time to be healed and be fine while his condition was worsening. It was just that he knew how to handle his anger when it resurfaces. One night, Chris had invited me to his family gathering, Bry, as his friend, of course. He introduced me to his family members, and they were very much welcoming. I enjoyed spending time with them, and I was looking forward to spending some more time with them also. Mind you, I had lied to Kenny and told him that I was going home. Mom needed one. I know it was a lame lie and somehow dangerous, but I had to come up with something solid that would make him not pay enough attention to me because he trusted my mom. Time passed. I don't know how Kenny found out about my friendship with Chris, but he did, and hell broke loose. He first asked me if there is any connection between myself and Chris. For obvious reasons, I denied having any connection with his boss, but deep down I knew that what was happening between Chris and I was not just a connection. I was way above the word connection. I think I had started to fall for Chris, but I was too scared of the outcome when the truth was to find out. Chris and I once kissed, and his lips were so soft and juicy. I craved for more. I desired his touch and everything with him. Since my husband was no longer performing, so I found someone outside my marriage to perform for me. What I disliked about Kenny was because he treated himself as a junkie, always eating and minded their own business. I had completely forgotten that Kenny knew me like the back of my hand. He saw me at the mall one day and asked what I was doing there. Mind you, that time I was waiting for Chris. As I was about to answer him, Chris came and the space got too thin for me. I felt like I was suffocating. I mean, 2 men in front of me. The other one was the man that I loved with all my being, and the other, it was the man who fulfilled me with joy and great intimacy. As much as I loved my husband, but his boss was doing me so great. He made me reach cloud 9, and I would feel like I was in heaven dancing with God's disciples. I was no longer enjoying intimacy with my husband W=, because I would always think of Chris and started comparing the two. I know that was wrong of me, but I couldn't give myself to be away from Chris. He was like a drug in my soul. He was healing it. Chris once told me that he didn't have any family. His family had disowned him after the passing of his parents. The one that we had gone to for a gathering, Bry, was his foster family. I didn't ask any more questions. So we decided to talk about random things while watching a series called Riverdale. One thing led to another. One minute we were watching a series while having small talks here and there. The next minute he kissed me. That time Kenny and I were no longer on good terms. He had even moved out of the house. What Chris did first shook me because I had thought we were just going to be friends with a little bit of benefits. I had tried to ignore and hide the feeling I got when I was around him because I was scared that he would reject me. I think Chris had caught feelings for me, and I was actually feeling him too. But we both had pride to confess or come clean. Days turned into weeks. I heard a knock at the door, and to my surprise, it was Kenny. He looked like he was ready for water. He was super angry. Even when that guy who bumped into his car did what he did, he was not angry to the level that I had seen in front of me. He looked like he wanted to strangle me. I asked him what was going on, and he didn't answer me. Instead, he smashed the TV that I was watching with a baseball bat. He was acting all crazy, and it scared me to the core. I tried begging him to calm down. It was like I was pouring gas in an already blazing fire. He got more furious and kept asking why I did what I did. He started calling me names, telling me that I didn't know him and he would show me who he really was. I silently prayed for my safety and to escape. I couldn't even call anyone because he had smashed my phone on the wall. He started screaming, destroying things, and throwing tantrums. As he was busy throwing tantrums and destroying things, he approached where I was standing. I was standing in the corner of the lounge. He roughly grabbed me and asked why I made him a fool. He furthered by saying that I had made him a laughingstock at his work. He regrets even introducing me to his boss, and now he believed that I was only with him for money and not him. I tried apologizing, but it was like I was speaking with air. He was extremely angry to the point that even his temple veins were popping out. Mind you, this person is white, so imagine how he looked when extremely angry. I had thought he was going to get physical with me. No lies, I understood his anger and frustrations. I should have been honest with him from the start so that he wouldn't feel like a fool in front of his boss and his colleagues. Well, those who knew about. He grabbed my arm and put me closer to his face so I would be able to look at him. I started fighting to break free from his tough hold, but I failed. After some time and so many attempts of breaking free from Kenny's hold, I eventually managed to get out and ran like my life was depending on them. I went to the police station and reported Kenny about his behavior, but the police department officers didn't help me. Then I went to our lawyer's office and asked her to file divorce papers and deliver them where Kenny was staying. I was too scared to be around Kenny, so I bought a new phone and brought back my old number. As I was going through my new phone, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard that it was Kenneth. He told me that I can run, but I cannot hide. He was still going to find me and answer all his questions. His call sent shivers down my spine. I don't know what he would do when he finds me, and I knew that I needed to get away from him. I had also broken things off with Chris so that I would be able to heal and find myself. I felt like I didn't know myself, so it was time for me to know myself better. You know, I don't regret being in a friendship relationship with Chris, but I do regret ever making Kenneth a fool. I went against my wedding vows and destroyed my marriage. I blamed myself for the fact that I had provoked Kenny's mental breakdown. If I didn't get into any relationship with Chris, all of this would have been avoided. If I declined to be Kenny's +1 at his work's function, I wouldn't even be here now, trying to hide from Kenny. There was a time when I would just have paranoia. I would feel like someone was looking at me or following me. I didn't know that Kenny was obsessed with me because what he was doing was for obsessed people only. Yes, I had done him wrong in the most cruel way possible. But do you guys think it's okay for him to be obsessed with me like this? I mean, he should just sign the divorce papers and get help not to plot against me and want to make my life a living hell. Already I am in hell. I am in fear of the unknown. I don't know what would ever happen if I were to bump into him, maybe at the mall. And the worst part, since I had quitted my waitress job, Kenny was the one providing for me. I then realized that he had stopped all my cards that I had opened when I was with him, meaning I had nothing on my name. In the aftermath of my breakup with Kenny, I decided to strictly focus on rebuilding my confidence and pursuing my career on my own terms. I couldn't allow Kenneth to bully me anymore. He was also a human being, so I cannot be scared of him forever. Life has to move on. But my question is how? I mean, it's not easy avoiding a broken heart that is seeking revenge. I loved Kenneth, and I still do. His actions is the one that led me to his boss's arms. Sometimes love alone is not enough, and it needs a strong person to be in a relationship with someone like Kenny. Please help me here. What should I do, and where do I start moving on without the fear of bumping into Kenneth? I am still scared, but I also want to move on and live my life freely. Please advise me on this one, please.